build a handrail. So we have a rake. What we had the luxury to do on this one was transfer an existing railing. So we have a metal railing that we took down, which is down here. This is part of it. And then we have the other part there. So we have the luxury of getting the dimensions, the true dimensions to what's in the house, what's laid out. We're just building a new handrail, which is going to be different material. So we're using flat bar. This is 1/2 inch by 2 inch flat bar. We're basically framing it out with that. This is going to be our front leg. This is our top rail, bottom rail. We have a back rail. We have one more centerpiece, and then we're going to have horizontal pieces going in here. So what we want to do basically after we get our layout is just step one is getting a baseline. Getting a baseline or a datum point. And what we're using for that here is our angle iron. If you come around here, you can see it through there, but come around here, you can see it's tacked to the table. You can clamp it, tack it. You can use something else. We don't have a lot of clamping on our tables, so clamping ability, so we usually tack. But to avoid tacking up and scarring up our railing that's going to be in the house, and we want to minimize what we're doing on that, is we're going to clamp it to our angle line here. So I had it lifted so we could cut it. So now I'll drop it down. We have our outline, so I want to get it lined up with that. So again, 1/2 inch. There's a ton of things that we'll need to know and we'll have to go over as you're doing these. I guess where we could start, and number one, the number one thing you need to know when you're doing handrails, especially when you're utilizing flat bar, but square tubing, rectangle tubing as well, is you need to know not to weld on the bottom. Not to weld on the bottom. What you want, what we're paid for is creating basically works of art. Something somebody's gonna walk through, they're gonna touch, they're gonna see. It's decorative, it's ornamental, but it's long lasting, it's lifelong. You know, as long as they're in their house, they're gonna see that every day. If there's a scar on it, if there's a bad workmanship on it, they're gonna see that. You know, so we want to avoid that at all costs. So we put our we try to utilize clamps as opposed to tacking it to the table. So I'm getting clamps. You need a lot of clamps because you need to make sure everything's straight. When we're dealing with the higher end or even lower end projects, anytime we're dealing with a project, we want the best quality. So the best quality means the best practices. So keeping things straight is paramount. So when I build this frame out, what you want to do in order to keep this straight, because this flat bar and anything, if you think about it, anything that gets hot, what happens to it? When something gets hot, when a spark hits you, when the sun hits you, right? What happens? You usually move, right? So same thing with steel, same thing with wood, it moves. When heat is applied, it moves. So we want to avoid welds that are underneath, because what's going to happen to that is the steel is going to move. When you look down it in the long term, when you look down it when you're finished, when it's standing up, you'll see dips in it where the welds were at the bottom if you do the weld. So we have to utilize a lot of beveling, because all our welds are going to be on the sides. We're not going to have any underneath. On this front one, we can put some here in the corner if need be, but all the welds going to be on the sides. And that goes for the whole build. So everything has to be firm. So we have to put bevels. So when we put a bevel, we're going to fill it in with weld. So when we grind it down to make it smooth, that weld's still there and it still holds together. So this one needs a bevel. And we talked about it earlier, but when we're dealing with this thick material, so if you look at this, if you want to look in, so you see the difference, see where it's that dark gray. If you can kind of feel it, it's kind of a, well, here it's not. Sometimes it's a little rough, but you see that dark gray. That dark gray is mill scale. So that's without the mill scale, so that's mill scale. So you don't want to weld on that because you aren't getting true weld on it if you try to go on top of the mill still. That can prevent a good weld, prevent a good hole. A good bevel on there. Putting a good bevel here so that when we put that weld, there's material in there to hold this together so it doesn't disappear whenever we match it up. So that'll receive, that's there. We have this side that's already beveled. Need to get the right height. So we're almost ready to tack this. I think we can go ahead and tack it. So basically tacking this, getting it set up, and then filling in. We need one centerpiece, same size, and then we'll go with our horizontal. So that's what I'll do now. Go ahead and get this tacked up. We're using our Miller 211 right now to weld this out. So we want to make sure it's flush. So everything, so right here, this table isn't flush. It's not flat, not totally level. So you see how we have a high end here as opposed to this because we're transitioning off a table to this table. So we want to make sure this is squared up first. And I see I missed a cut there, so I need to get that angle cut before I do that, finish that angle out. But we want to make sure that this is flush, because if it's not flush, if it's not at this point when we weld it, if it's at that point, it's off on the other side. So either way, it's not going to work. So I need to finish cutting that. Now we bevel. Now you want to make sure you get a deep bevel, not a wide bevel, because we want it to be able to penetrate in there, but we don't want to have to cover that much weld as far as the size, the width of the weld. We just want it to be in there to hold it, but we don't want to have to put 100 pounds of weld to make it stick. That line's up there. So this one you can do the thumb test with your height. If you feel a flicker, then it's not flush. So this one, I feel a little flicker, so I need to raise this one up to get it flush. Line. This one needs to be raised. Again, we're just tacking right now. You don't want to weld anything out until you get everything lined up. And if it doesn't, this one didn't get flush. So as we fill it, this one isn't high enough. So this post isn't high enough, so it's not flush. If that happens, don't let it go, because it's gonna expose itself on the back side. You get to the back side, it's gonna be sticking out. This is at the top, right where the hand meets, so you're gonna try to grind it and try to chase it, and it's not going to be a good result. So we're going to go ahead while it's minimal, go ahead and grind that down, grind that weld down, and try it again if you have something to. Alright, that's tacked up. Now all we're lacking is this line right here. It's still on point everywhere. Pretty good. Should be a little bit better, but we'll go with that. Come up a little to flush. That gets it locked in. So that's locked in. So now we have to match this. One in the middle, we want to find dead center, put that there, then start cutting our ballast going horizontally. We'll stop right there.